Thank you for attending. Questions can be asked using the Q&A pane in the WebEx control panel. Today's presentation will be recorded. If you have any objection, you may disconnect at this time. I will now turn the presentation over to Henry. You may begin.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, everybody from SHRMLI, Long Island. This is Henry Shapiro. I guess I should say it's Henry Shapiro coming to you live from home, obviously not in the office, as I'm sure many of you are dealing with. I hope everybody is doing well. For those of you that don't know me, I'm an attorney in the Melville office of Jackson Lewis, one of our, I think we're at 61 offices now and about 900 something attorneys. So happy to be here. We are going to talk today, and I won't spend too much time talking about nonsense about my life for the last 2.5 months. A, most of you probably don't care and you have your own stories. B, we have a lot to cover, but it's not going to be much in the way of legal substantive knowledge. It's going to be actually something that maybe you do or don't know even happened because it happened overnight. I have now a terrible habit of waking up nice and early and checking to see what did Governor Cuomo do today. So for those of you that are either just not paying attention because you don't care, or you are fortunate enough that somehow you're in such a silo that you don't have to deal with this stuff, what we'll talk about today is phase 2 in New York. So we'll do a broad overview of the phases. We'll get into phase 2 guidance that came out overnight. For those of you that didn't see it, I will say when you get off this webinar, because I'm sure you want to do nothing more than your Friday afternoon or your weekend, then read, I think it's about 12 pages of single-spaced, probably 11-point font guidance from New York State. But it's there for your own edification. Tomorrow, I think it's supposed to be like 80 degrees and sunny. The rain is out of the forecast, so I don't anticipate many of you reading this. So I will try to give you a summary now. I will give a little disclaimer. I could not, unless we wanted to do about 40 slides in 20 minutes, I could not cover everything in the guidance, and I read through it this morning. So I will say to people and employers who are getting ready for a potential phase 2. We all know Long Island just went into, and we're going to focus on Long Island. We're not going to really focus on the other regions today. We know Long Island went to phase 1. I think it was Wednesday. Today's Friday, I think. So phase 2, the original guidance from Governor Cuomo said that he will not allow a next phase to begin until 2 weeks have passed from the preceding phase. So the earliest it would seem phase 2 could happen would be June 10th for Long Island. Again, there could obviously be setbacks. Right now, the regions that reopened on May 15th, which were more so the upstate regions with much less density, those many people, and if you go on Twitter and you want to read some fun stuff between local legislators and government officials and Governor Cuomo, you can do that if you're really bored. They were under the impression they were going to be reopening to phase 2 today. Governor Cuomo's press conference, which I haven't seen what time it's supposed to be today. I know it's usually around 11:30, so maybe it's already happened, and we'll have to catch the highlights later since there's no sports highlights to watch. They are not moving to phase 2 yet, but it seems that a lot of them, the governor's office did tell them that possibly tomorrow, because Cuomo wants other international experts to review the phase 1 protocols and make sure that they can successfully and satisfactorily move out of phase 1 into phase 2. So that being said, the earliest I think we're going to see phase 2 on Long Island is June 10th. But don't hold me to that. It could definitely move. It could be a June 11th or June 12th. It could be later than that. What I can say is it does not seem, unless he changes the law, it will be any earlier than that. So what we got this morning with phase 2 is we got clarification on some of the industries that are going to be covered under the guidance and under phase 2. Back when Governor Cuomo announced the New York Forward initiative, which is what this all is, we were all under New York on pause, and then New York Forward is kind of coming out of pause. So for those of you that do or don't know me, I'm not the oldest person, but I'm also not as young as I'd like to be, so I'm 33. This kind of sounds like an old school VCR. You hit pause, you hit DVR. Twitter is the one doing all the recording of this. So we have all the old VCR remote functions with fast forward and I guess we're all playing a large game in all of this, so I haven't had fun. I don't know if anybody's actually winning, but phase two. So what Governor Cuomo did say at the beginning was that he was going to release a list of basically every business and what phase it falls under. That list has not come out yet. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but he did expand what is phase two covered. So we have offices, which is going to be a very large category, and I assume many of the people I'm speaking with today are going to fall into that. Offices, real estate, essential, and phase two in-store retail, vehicle sales, leases and rentals, retail, rental, repair, and cleaning, and then commercial building management. So it's still wide. We haven't gotten new clarification yet on phases 3 and 4. That will probably come in another 2 weeks, but this is what we have today. Originally, this was referred to as professional services, but now it seems to be more broad to consider any office-based element. So what still remains in the guidance, and there are detailed guidelines for each industry that I just rambled off. Every employer, essential or non-essential, must affirm the detailed guidelines for their industry. If you're not sure on your industry, I unfortunately don't have much that I can do to help you. It's somewhat of a guessing game just because we don't have a ton of guidance on this yet. But what has been clear in all the guidance for every industry, phase 1 and phase 2, is this 50% maximum occupancy. A lot of the questions I've been getting have been about, we want to bring all our people back. We want everybody back in the office. Teleworking's over. We don't want to do it anymore. There has been nothing so far to erode the executive order that says all businesses, essential or non-essential, all businesses must continue to allow and provide for teleworking to the maximum extent possible. That has not changed. We can probably go back and forth for hours as to whether this is going to become the way of the future and telework is going to become more acceptable. I will tell you, it's a question that Jackson Lewis is tossing around itself with people that are much more important than I am and deciding what's the future for the Jackson Lewis staff, from attorneys to non-attorney staff. But what is consistent for all New York businesses is this 50% maximum occupancy. So that's based on the certificate of occupancy. And I suppose you would get from, either the building code or fire department, fire marshal. You cannot exceed that. There is no exceptions to that, at least in the guidance. So to say that we've had people teleworking since, I think it was March 23rd was the first work day when this took effect. I think the 100% density reduction was March 22nd at 8 p.m., which was a Sunday night. So March 23rd, we've had people teleworking hypothetically from March 23rd until now. Now we want them back. You're going to need to have a very good reason. I do suggest you discuss it with counsel, whether that's Jackson Lewis or somebody else. You're going to have a very good reason as to why you need those folks back. And I've seen, I don't like to speculate, but I have seen some employers receive, we can call them threat letters from the New York State Attorney General when they're not allowing proper teleworking. This is so well publicized that it's not hard for an employee to try to complain about something to some government official, whether it be the Department of Health, the Department of Labor, local Board of Health, or the governor's office, or the Attorney General's office. So if you can allow teleworking, continue allowing it. That shouldn't change. And again, just from a disciplinary standpoint, teleworking doesn't give people a hall pass to do whatever they want and skirt your policies and your performance expectations. Treat them the same as you would with some limited exceptions based on just the climate. Treat them the same as you would if they were going to be your in-office employee. So getting back to the guidance that came out today. Office-based work, what is it? Business activities where the core function takes place within an office setting. This guidance may apply, but is not limited to businesses and entities in the following sectors: professional services, nonprofit, technology, administrative support, and higher education administration, excluding full campus reopening, because we know that schools are still closed and education is still closed. Education is part of phase 4. The guidelines may also apply to businesses operating parts of a company's business functions under different guidelines. So front office for a construction company. So maybe your business is, maybe you have only operated the essential parts of your business so far from phase 1, which is what you should have been doing. This phase, once the region moves into this phase, once Long Island moves into this phase, we can then move from just having the hypothetical construction workers there. Now you could have your office staff there. So this is going to be very broad. What are some other, just quickly, some other guidelines that came out? The retail, rental, repair, and cleaning activities. What does this include? This is all part of phase 2 again. What does this include? Electronics repair, equipment rental, clothing rental, laundromats, other clothing/fabric cleaning services and residential cleaning services, commercial building managements, commercial/non-residential property management entities and related activities. That will be, that will be prevalent probably for many companies in the city, but I'm sure there are some out here that can reopen with that. The problem with the city, obviously, is they are the last of the 10 regions scheduled for reopening because right now they don't even have a date. They're still working. As of, I think, yesterday, they were still at 4 out of 7 of the guidelines. So what must I do? Maybe the most important slide in all of this, because if you do this, you'll learn about everything else that's going to come after this. You must have a business safety plan. For those of you that don't know about that already, it's on the governor's website. It's very easy to get. If you don't know how to get it, you can email your counsel. You can Google it. Not hard to find. It is, I think, a 4 or 5, 6, maybe 6-page document. I'm trying to think, 5, 6-page document. And it's a template. It's not required that you use that exact form, but something that is going to address the criteria within there is required. You do not need to submit it to an agency. It's not going to the Empire State Development Corporation that we all learned about when there was the essential, non-essential issue for businesses and staying open during the last 2.5 months. It is just something that you must have and complete and keep within your workplace. So obviously we recommend that you do it. You know, if you have questions, you talk with us about it. And this is not something that is just a farce. It's something that you do and then you follow it. Having it and then not following any of it is useless then if you have it. It's like having policies and ignoring your policies. What else must you do? You must affirm detailed guidelines. Those are what I am going to read to you about from the office setting. I'm not going to get into any of the other settings because I don't have time, but they're all available online and very easy to come by. You must electronically affirm them online, so you are essentially signing that you are going to comply with these guidelines. And there are a lot of musts and requirements in those guidelines, which we'll focus on today. There are also a lot of strongly encouraged and strongly recommended and shoulds that you're going to want to consider as well. What else must you know about and do? PPE and social distancing. I'm sure you're all probably sick of those words, but social distancing is going to be absolutely required at every workplace. And PPE, as an employer, you're going to be required to provide your employees with PPE. They can use their own if they'd like, as long as it's sufficient, covers the nose, covers the mouth. But if you have not already procured PPE, I strongly recommend you get out there and you find whatever company it is that you get your supplies from to get masks and hand sanitizer and things of that nature, extra soap, towels, and things like that, because you want to have as much of a ready supply as possible. Screening protocols, this is about your employees actually coming into the office. This is also going to be very important. Whether you're doing a temperature check, you do not have to. These guidelines do not require that. They allow it. The EEOC allows it, so you can do a temperature check, but there's also a series of screening questions that must be asked to all employees. So let's start with the screening, because that's the most important, starting while we have about 6 minutes left. So temperature checks are permissible. Employers must implement mandatory daily health screening practices of their employees and, where practicable, visitors, but such screening shall not be mandated for delivery personnel. So you don't have to test the FedEx or UPS guy, but you must for your visitors, for a law firm, when you have clients, for a business, when you have customers, whatever it is, when they're coming in, they must have daily health screening practices. Again, that's a little bit flexible, but you cannot say, oh, we don't screen our employees, we just trust them all. That's not acceptable. Screening practices may be performed remotely, for example, by telephone or electronic survey before the employee or visitor reports to the office to the extent possible, or may be performed on site. Obviously, I've heard of apps out there where there's screening apps. I've heard of healthcare companies that are putting things out like that. To the extent, I think Microsoft has one, to the extent that you can move forward with an app version or some kind of screening in that electronic format, probably even better, because you prevent employees from coming in and possibly contaminating anybody, even at the door, when you're doing the screening. So if you can get ahead of it, and hey, if you possibly are able to save yourself a couple of hours of call-in pay by stopping them before they even leave for work, you're all the better. What else also about screening from the office guidelines. Screening should be coordinated to prevent employees or visitors from intermingling in close contact with each other prior to completion of the screening. So have a designated area where you're going to do the screening. Don't, have 15 different entrances and screening set up at all of them. Funnel everybody to one entrance, have them stand 6 feet apart when waiting at the entrance. And it's going to be a change. It's going to be new. Who knows how long it's going to be here for, but it's something that we have to do if, we want business to continue and the world to continue. Screening is required for all employees or visitors and completed using a questionnaire that determines whether the employee has. So I told you these are the questions that must be asked, whether they basically had close contact, approximate contact with somebody who's COVID positive in the last 14 days, whether they've tested positive or whether they've experienced any symptoms. That's what you really want to know. There's a few more questions you might want to ask. You might want to ask about travel. You can get into that in a discussion with counsel as far as what you could and should or shouldn't ask, but these are the ones that must be asked, and it's pretty obvious why. Physical distancing, you must limit the number of occupants at any given time to 50% of the maximum occupancy. I already went over that. You must ensure that a distance of at least 6 feet is maintained among individuals at all times unless the safety of the activity that's going on requires it be a shorter distance. If that's the case, you must wear a face covering. You must modify, you should, I don't think this one was a must, but I think we'll understand that it should be a must. You must modify seating arrangements, so this is in your kitchens, your break rooms, the conference rooms, to the extent you're not absolutely closing them for use. If you're going to keep them open and in use, make sure that you have everybody 6 feet apart, chairs, desks, tables, whatever it may be. People distancing, modifying or reconfigure the use and or restrict the number of workstations, employee seating areas, desks, so that employees are at least 6 feet apart in all directions. Again, the 6 feet, the social distancing. I keep stressing that because that's what's littered in these guidelines that you must affirm that you're going to comply with. So I'm not just saying this to bore you. These are things that you are going to swear to online that you are going to do for your business. And then if you report that you didn't, who knows what the penalties will be at this point. But I'm sure there will be penalties because somebody in the Attorney General's office will take this up because it's the only way to prevent it. If you cannot reconfigure things to allow for 6 feet of space, you must provide either plastic shielding walls, face covering. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen, I saw it the other day at Dunkin' Donuts, extra plexiglass and just barriers in between customers and people. And here, probably between co-employees. You should prohibit the use of small spaces, elevators, etc., by more than one individual at a time, unless all individuals in such space have the same wearing acceptable face coverings. More on people distancing should be put in place measures should be put in place for hallway traffic and common areas to make sure that we have, you've probably seen, if you've gone to any banks or anything, probably seen tape on the ground, or at the supermarket, tape on the ground, a little squares to stand in. Those are good ideas. Those will work. That would be compliance here. You must post signs at the office that are consistent with the New York State Department of Health COVID-19 signage that's available online. You must limit in-person gatherings, meetings, conferences to the greatest extent possible. This has been going on at this point for 2.5 months. I have not had it as an attorney. I have not had an in-person meeting in this point almost 3 months. Everything has been done via some kind of web-based video conferencing software. More on people distancing. You must take measures to reduce interpersonal contact and congregation. So you must do these things. Now, you don't have to do all of these. These are some examples, but you must do something here to reduce the interpersonal contact. So only have necessary staff in the office. That's not a bad idea at all. Adjusting workplace hours, not a bad idea at all. Maybe you have staggered schedules. You have A/B teams, and you'll see under shift design. Make sure you tell people, one or, maybe only 1 or 2 people in an elevator, depending on the size of the elevator. Reducing in-office workforce, again, that's remote work. These are all things you might have been doing already. The key is to not just stop them now because you think you can stop them now. The key is to continue them because this is what is being required under the guidelines. This is what's required, it sounds like, for general health and safety. Must establish designated areas for pickups and deliveries. So again, if you have deliveries coming in 4 different areas, streamline it. Let's focus everything so we can control things. That way, if anything ever comes up contaminated, we know exactly where we need to sanitize. If we ever find out the delivery driver from XYZ company tested positive and they reach out to us, that way we know they were restricted to this loading bay. They were restricted to this entrance, and that way we know it's the cleaner who came in contact. This is the contact tracing. We know who was there and who came into contact with them. In addition to the necessary PPE is required for certain workplace activities, that's more of a safety issue. You must procure, fashion, or otherwise obtain acceptable face coverings and provide such coverings to employees while at work at no cost to the employee. You must maintain an adequate supply of face coverings, masks, and other required PPE on hand should an employee need a replacement or should a visitor be in need. Face coverings must be cleaned or replaced after use and may not be shared. So for most people that are using, T-shirts and fabrics, those can be washed. For the surgical masks, those are probably a dime. It used to be a dime a dozen, but those are something that you're not going to wash. Unless you have a washable one, you throw those out. Those will be reused. Must allow employees to use their own. Again, and for those who are concerned about, how are we supposed to have all this PPE? If you have the ability to have people working from home, you don't have to worry about this. You don't have to give a face covering to somebody who's working from home if they're working from home. They're not in the office. Must allow employees to use their own acceptable face coverings, but you cannot require employees to supply their own face coverings. So important. You have to let them use them. You let the employee use them, but you have to at least be able to supply them, and you can't force the employee to bring their own. Must train employees on how to adequately put on, take off, and clean as applicable and discard PPE, including but not limited to appropriate face coverings. What we have been kind of treating this as is think of the airline safety video that you see with the oxygen mask and the seat belt that you get right before you take off on a plane. Make sure you document that you train your employees. This is just standard employment law and HR 101. Must in the document could be, a sign-in sheet or some kind of email or something documenting that the training actually occurred and, who attended. Must advise employees and visitors to wear face coverings in common areas, including elevators, lobbies, and any common area in the office, a lunchroom, a break room, a conference room. Must put in place measures to limit the sharing of objects. This one's obvious. We're not going to have people freely using each other's pens and keyboards and mice and chairs and desks and things of that nature. All right, and this is the final slide. Cleaning. You must ensure adherence to hygiene, cleaning, and disinfection requirements as advised by the CDC and DOH. So this is, we all are probably familiar with, washing your hands for 20 seconds with soap and water, and having 60% alcohol-based hand sanitizer, things of that nature. You must maintain logs that include the date, time, and scope of cleaning. This is if you're doing like a more thorough cleaning, you must have a log that includes the date and time of the cleaning. You must provide and maintain hand hygiene stations on, that's a typo, sorry, but in the office. Check guidelines for specifics because there's a lot more as far as, where they need to be located, by what doors need to be located. The guidelines that you will be affirming, which you should absolutely read, will lay all this out. Ensure regular cleaning and disinfecting of restrooms. That should have been happening anyway, but it should be happening more frequently now. And the rules get a little bit more difficult and a little bit more tougher as to what you need to do if somebody tests positive, and I think we're all probably used to that. I'm sure you've all heard the words, deep cleaning after there's been a positive case. So that's going to continue, and that's in the guidelines as well. So with that said, I apologize for running a little bit over. I hope the weather stays the way it is supposed to stay. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and these issues are coming fast. They're coming furious. These are they are hopefully all going to put the entire state and the country and the world in a better place. But the goal here is compliance. And if you're not sure on something, you're not sure how to do something, rather than doing something innocently and being wrong, talk it out. Let's contact your counsel. Let's figure out a way to get you in compliance so you can restore operations and hopefully restore your business to some maximum extent possible. With that being said, everybody have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for your time and take care, and I will speak to you in June.